The teepees burned like torches against the night sky. Ethan Thornhill stood frozen in his cavalry uniform, the blue wool suddenly feeling like a coffin shroud wrapped tight around his chest. The screaming had stopped 5 minutes ago. That was worse than when it had filled the canyon. Silence meant there was no one left to scream. His commanding officer rode past face blank as stone. Orders were orders, hostiles cleared, mission accomplished. But Ethan's boots were rooted in the dirt and his hands would not stop shaking. Somewhere in the smoke a child's cry pierced the dark. Just one, thin and terrified and still alive. He ran before his mind could catch up to his body. The heat from the flames seared his face as he plunged into the destruction. Shapes moved in the smoke. Small shapes. He grabbed the first child he could reach, a girl no older than 6. Her dark eyes wide with shock. She clutched a turquoise bracelet in one small fist. He pulled 2 more children from the chaos, dragging them toward the edge of the firelight where the smoke thinned. The little girl with the bracelet looked up at him. Her lips moved. A single word in Apache. "Shoo, thank you." Then the scene dissolved into blackness the way it always did. Ethan Thornhill woke to cold winter air and the sound of his own breathing harsh in the silence of the small ranch house. His shirt clung to his skin with sweat despite the December chill. The dream again. Always the dream. He sat up slowly, pressing his palms against his eyes until he saw stars instead of fire. Through the thin wall he could hear Samuel's uneven breathing. The boy slept poorly. They both did. The house felt like a tomb most nights, too quiet, too empty, filled with the ghost of a woman who had died bringing life into the world. Ethan stood and walked to the window. Dawn was still an hour away, but he would not sleep again. He never did after the dream. 6 months. It had been 6 months since Red Canyon, and the nightmares showed no sign of fading. Outside, the New Mexico Badlands stretched endlessly under a sky so vast it made a man feel like an insect. The land here was unforgiving. Dry creek beds that ran with water maybe 3 times a year, scrub brush and rocky soil that fought every seed you planted. But it was far from everything. Far from the army. Far from towns where people asked questions. Far from the memories that followed him like wolves. He had chosen isolation. It was the only honest choice left. By the time pale light touched the horizon, Ethan had the fire going and coffee boiling. Samuel emerged from his room thin and quiet, his light brown hair sticking up in places. The boy was 8 years old but seemed smaller. Grief had a way of stealing size from children. They ate in silence, cornmeal mush and yesterday's biscuits. Samuel pushed the food around his tin plate without much interest. Ethan did not push. They had learned to exist beside each other without many words. Some mornings that felt like enough. Most mornings it felt like failure. After breakfast, Ethan loaded the rifle and gestured toward the door. They had traps to check along the dry creek bed about 2 miles north. With winter settling in hard, every rabbit counted. Samuel pulled on his too large coat, a hand-me-down from a boy in town, and followed his father into the cold. The land looked different in winter. Harder, somehow. The sparse vegetation turned brown and brittle. The mountains in the distance wore caps of snow that never quite reached down into the basin where the ranch sat. The wind cut through clothing like it had a personal grudge. Samuel walked 3 paces behind Ethan, his boots scuffing the dirt in an irregular rhythm. Ethan had been teaching the boy to read tracks, to set snares, to understand the language of the land. Samuel learned slowly, his mind often somewhere else. Ethan understood. The boy's mother had been dead only 2 years. That was no time at all when you were 8. Some wounds never closed. They just learned to live with you. The first 2 traps were empty. The third had been sprung, but whatever creature had triggered it had escaped. Ethan knelt to reset the mechanism, his scarred hands working automatically. Samuel crouched beside him, watching but not really seeing. It was Samuel who spotted her. The boy had wandered toward the edge of the creek bed where winter rains from weeks past had carved fresh channels in the sandy bottom. He stopped suddenly, his whole body going still in that way children do when something is wrong. Ethan looked up, followed his son's gaze. A shape lay crumpled against the far bank. Dark clothing, long black hair, completely motionless. Ethan's hand went to his rifle before his brain fully registered what he was seeing. He crossed the distance in long strides, Samuel frozen behind him. As he got closer, details resolved. A woman. Apache from her clothing and the way her hair was bound. Young, maybe early 20s. A dark stain spread across the shoulder of her torn shirt. Blood dried to brown at the edges, but still wet in the center. She was not dead. Her chest rose and fell in shallow movements. Her skin burned with fever when he touched her forehead. Every rational part of Ethan's mind screamed at him to walk away. An Apache woman injured this close to his property. The army was still rounding up stragglers, forcing them onto reservations up north. Helping her was not just dangerous, it was potentially suicidal. The cavalry did not look kindly on white men who aided what they called hostiles. The local ranchers would be worse. He should leave her. Ride into town, tell the sheriff. Let the law handle it. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. But she lay there in almost the exact position as the little girl in his dreams. Same dark hair, same stillness. And something in Ethan's chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3 years, cracked just enough to let feeling through. He knelt beside her. Up close he could see the gunshot wound in her left shoulder, clean through which was lucky, but infected, which was not. She needed medicine, bandages, water. She needed help soon, or the fever would kill her before the wound did. Samuel had edged closer, his eyes huge. He said nothing. The boy had learned early that sometimes silence was the only safe response. Ethan made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He stripped off his coat and wrapped it around the woman, then lifted her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. The fever had burned through whatever reserve she'd had. Her head lolled against his chest, unconscious but alive. They walked back to the ranch in silence. Ethan's mind raced through possibilities and consequences. He could not take her into the house, too risky if anyone came by. But the barn had a small tack room in the back, insulated enough to hold heat from a small stove. He could keep her there, hidden. He told himself it would only be until she was well enough to leave. A few days at most. Then she could go north to the reservation where she belonged, and his life could return to its quiet, guilty routine. He told himself this even as he knew it was a lie. The barn smelled of hay and horse sweat and old leather. Ethan laid the woman on a pile of blankets in the tack room, then sent Samuel to the house for water and clean rags. The boy ran grateful for a task that took him away from the unconscious stranger. Alone with her, Ethan allowed himself to really look at her face. She was beautiful in the way desert sunsets were beautiful, harsh and striking and completely indifferent to whether anyone appreciated it. High cheekbones, strong jaw, a mouth set in a line even in unconsciousness. A thin scar ran along her left temple, old and faded. He unbuttoned her shirt just enough to see the wound. The bullet had passed through the meat of her shoulder, missing bone but tearing muscle. The edges were red and swollen. He had seen enough battlefield injuries to know infection when he saw it. Samuel returned with the supplies. Together they cleaned the wound as best they could. Ethan poured whiskey over it, wasting precious alcohol, but knowing it might save her life. She did not wake even when the liquor hit raw flesh. The fever had her too deep. He bandaged her shoulder with strips of clean cotton, then covered her with every blanket he could spare. The small stove in the corner would keep the worst of the cold at bay. He filled a tin cup with water and left it beside her. If she woke, she would need it. Before he left, he spoke to her in halting Apache. The language felt clumsy in his mouth. He had learned it years ago, thinking it would make him better at his job. Instead, it had made him understand exactly who he was being ordered to kill. Shu, safe, peace. He did not know if she heard him. That night, Ethan made Samuel swear not to speak of what they had found. The boy nodded solemnly. He understood secrets. His whole short life had been built on them. The secret of his mother's death. The secret of his father's nightmares. The secret of why they lived so far from everything. One more secret seemed almost natural. Ethan checked on the woman 3 times before dawn. Each time she remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. The fever raged on. He changed the bandage once, gave her water by tilting her head and letting drops fall between her lips. She swallowed reflexively, but did not wake. On the second day she began to stir. Small movements at first, her fingers clenching, her head turning side to side. Then late in the afternoon her eyes opened. Ethan was checking her bandage when it happened. One moment she was still as death. The next her hand shot out and grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor. She swung it at his head with surprising strength for someone half dead from fever. He caught her wrist gently but firmly. She fought him, her eyes wild and unfocused. He could feel how weak she was. The effort cost her everything. Within seconds she collapsed back against the blankets, gasping. Ethan released her immediately and stepped back, hands raised, palms out. He spoke the only Apache words he remembered clearly. Shoo, shoo, safe, peace. She stared at him. Shock replaced fear in her dark eyes. She said something in Apache too fast for him to follow. He shook his head. Slowly, carefully, he pointed to himself. Ethan. Then to her wound. Then to the water cup. He mimed drinking. She watched him for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp despite the fever, calculating, deciding whether to trust or to keep fighting. Finally she nodded once. He handed her the water. She drank it all, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked at him again and spoke a single word. Dia. Her name. He repeated it, trying to match her pronunciation. She nodded, then her eyes closed again. The brief surge of consciousness faded, but something had shifted. She was not unconscious now, just resting, saving her strength. Ethan left her to sleep and returned to the house. Samuel was at the kitchen table drawing in the margins of an old newspaper. The boy had always liked to draw, though he never showed anyone what he made. Ethan had found the hidden pictures once buried under the floorboards in Samuel's room. Drawings of a woman with kind eyes and long hair. His mother remembered in pencil strokes. He had not mentioned finding them. Some secrets were sacred. That night Samuel asked if the woman would die. Ethan said he did not know. The boy nodded and went to bed without another word. On the third day Dia was awake when Ethan entered the tack room. She sat propped against the wall, her dark eyes tracking his every movement. She looked better. The fever had broken sometime in the night. Color had returned to her face. He brought her food. Beans and cornbread, simple but filling. She ate slowly, watchfully, like an animal that expects the trap to spring at any moment. Ethan busied himself with other tasks in the barn, giving her space. He could feel her eyes on him the entire time, measuring, judging. He did not blame her. A white man's kindness had to feel like a trick. When he returned to collect the empty plate, she spoke. Her English was clear but accented. Why one word? It contained 100 questions. Ethan did not have a good answer. He settled for the truth. I do not know. She studied his face. He let her look. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy something. She nodded and handed back the plate. Over the next 2 days, a careful routine developed. Ethan would bring food and water 3 times a day. He would check her bandage, change it when needed. She would eat in silence and watch him with those dark, unreadable eyes. They spoke little. There was not much to say. Samuel, despite Ethan's warnings, had begun to visit her. The boy would slip into the barn when he thought his father was not looking. Ethan knew but said nothing. He would watch from the barn door as Samuel sat cross-legged on the floor, showing Dia his drawings. She would look at each one carefully, then say something soft in Apache that made Samuel smile. It was the first time Ethan had seen his son smile in months. On the 5th day, Dia stood for the first time. She moved slowly, testing her strength. The wound had begun to close pink and healthy at the edges. She was healing faster than Ethan had expected. Apache were tough, he reminded himself. They had to be to survive out here. That evening, as Ethan was preparing to leave the barn for the night, Dia spoke again. You know our language. It was not a question. Ethan paused. Yes. Why does a white man learn Apache? He could have lied. Should have lied. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. I thought it would make me better at killing you. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and sharp. Did it? She asked finally. No. It made me realize I was killing people. Dia looked at him for a long time. He met her gaze, not flinching. Whatever judgment she passed, he deserved it. She said nothing more, but something in her expression changed. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, just acknowledgement of a truth spoken. That night, Ethan did not sleep. He sat on the porch of the ranch house, rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. The stars were bright and cold and impossibly distant. Somewhere out there, cavalry patrols hunted for runaways. Somewhere out there, Apache families ran for their lives. And here in his barn, he was hiding a woman who had every reason to kill him in his sleep. The absurdity of it all almost made him laugh. Almost. The cavalry arrived 3 days later. Ethan was repairing fence posts when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. 6 riders moving at an easy pace. He recognized the formation. Military. His stomach dropped. He set down his tools and walked back toward the house, moving casually, showing no urgency. Samuel was inside. Dia was in the barn. He had to keep the soldiers away from both. The riders reached the ranch just after noon. Their leader was a man Ethan recognized immediately. Lieutenant Creed, 45 years old, career military, with a face like weathered granite and eyes that saw everything as either useful or expendable. Creed dismounted with the easy confidence of a man who knew he held all the power. His men stayed on their horses, hands resting casually near their sidearms. Thornhill, Creed said. His voice was flat professional. "Been a while," Lieutenant Ethan replied. He kept his face neutral. Years of military service had taught him how to hide everything behind a blank mask. Creed looked around the property, taking in the small house, the barn, the empty corrals. "You have made quite the life out here, away from everything. It suits me. I am sure it does." Creed's eyes settled back on Ethan. "We are looking for someone. Apache woman, early 20s. She escaped from a group being relocated to the Ojo Caliente reservation. Killed a soldier in the process." Ethan felt his pulse quicken but kept his breathing steady. "I have not seen anyone." "You are certain?" Creed took a step closer. "She would be desperate, possibly injured, might seek shelter. This land is empty for miles. If she was here, I would know." Creed studied him. The silence stretched. Ethan knew this technique. The waiting, the watching, letting the other man fill the silence with nervous words that might reveal truth. He said nothing. Finally, Creed nodded. "You were one of us once, Thornhill. 7th Cavalry. Good soldier from what I heard." Ethan said nothing. "Shame about that business at Red Canyon last summer. A man tries to do the right thing, sometimes it costs him." Creed's voice remained conversational. "A man tries to do the right thing, sometimes it costs him." Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides, then relaxed. "Is there anything else, Lieutenant? Just a reminder." Creed mounted his horse smoothly. "We are still at war out here, whether Washington admits it or not. Every Apache not on a reservation is a hostile. Anyone who helps them becomes a hostile too. I am sure you understand." "Perfectly." Creed tipped his hat, a mockery of politeness. "Good to see you, Thornhill. Stay safe out here. It is dangerous country." The cavalry rode away slowly, taking their time. Ethan stood frozen until they disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. That night he told Dia about the visit. She listened without expression. "They will come back," she said. "I know. You should have turned me in." Ethan shook his head. "No." "Why?" He thought about the question, about the little girl with the turquoise bracelet, about the faces he still saw in his nightmares, about the weight of guilt that no amount of isolation could wash away. "Because I have done enough harm." Dia looked at him with something that might have been respect, or might have been pity. He could not tell. 2 weeks passed. Winter settled deeper into the land, bringing cold that bit through clothing and froze water in the horse trough by morning. Dia grew stronger. She could walk without wincing now. The wound had sealed cleanly. She began to help around the ranch. Small things at first, mending tack, sorting supplies. Ethan did not ask her to work. She simply did it. Perhaps she needed to feel useful. Perhaps she was paying a debt she felt she owed. Samuel followed her everywhere now. The boy had attached himself to her like a shadow. Dia seemed not to mind. She taught him words in Apache, showed him how to braid leather properly, sang him songs in the evening that Ethan did not understand, but that made Samuel's eyes heavy with peace. Ethan watched from a distance and felt something dangerous growing in his chest, something that felt almost like hope. The knock came on a night so cold the stars seemed to crack the sky. Ethan was by the fire reading an old newspaper by lamplight. Samuel had gone to bed an hour ago. Dia was in the barn, as always, sleeping in the tack room she had claimed as her own. The knock was hard, urgent, not the sound of someone asking politely for entry. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Through the window he could see nothing but darkness and blowing snow. A late-season storm had moved in at dusk, turning the world white and hostile. "Who is it?" he called. Silence. Then another knock. He opened the door with the rifle raised. Cold wind hit him like a fist. Standing on his porch was a man he had never seen before. Apache, tall and broad-shouldered, with a warrior's bearing despite obvious exhaustion. Blood stained his shirt. A knife hung from his belt. The man's eyes went to the rifle, then to Ethan's face. When he spoke, his English was broken but clear. "My niece. She is here." Ethan's mind raced. Niece. Dia had not mentioned family, had not mentioned anyone looking for her. The man took a step forward. Ethan raised the rifle higher. From behind him he heard movement, turned to see Samuel standing in the hallway, eyes wide with fear, and beyond Samuel the barn door opening. Dia emerging into the snow, moving fast despite her healing wound. She saw the man and stopped. Her whole body went rigid. She spoke rapidly in Apache. The man replied. His voice was rough but gentle. Relief flooded his features. Dia turned to Ethan. Her expression was complicated, fearful, apologetic, defiant. "This is Tan," she said. "My uncle." Ethan kept the rifle trained on the stranger. An Apache warrior at his door. A wanted woman in his barn, his son watching from the shadows. Every choice that had led to this moment suddenly felt like steps into a trap. Tan raised his hands slowly, palms out. The gesture was careful, deliberate. When he spoke again, his English was clearer, as if he had been holding back before. "If you kill me, you kill her last family." The words hung in the frozen air. Truth or manipulation, Ethan could not tell. His finger rested on the trigger. One squeeze. Problem solved. Go back to isolation, to safety, to the slow death of guilt and loneliness. Dia stepped forward. She positioned herself between Ethan and Tan. Her dark eyes met his. "Please." One word, carrying the weight of everything unsaid. Ethan looked at Tan, at Dia, at Samuel still frozen in the doorway. The boy's face was pale but calm, watching his father, waiting to see what kind of man he would choose to be. Ethan lowered the rifle. 2 weeks, he said. Then you are gone. Tan nodded once. His shoulders sagged with relief. Dia let out a breath she had been holding. They moved into the barn together. Ethan followed, rifle still in hand, but no longer aimed. Inside, out of the wind, Tan leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Dia spoke to him in Apache. Quick, urgent questions. Tan answered in the same language, his voice low and weary. Ethan caught a few words. Cavalry, reservation, massacre. That last word made his blood go cold. Tan opened his eyes and looked at Ethan directly. When he spoke, he switched to English as if he wanted to make sure Ethan understood every word. 6 months ago, cavalry came to our village, Red Canyon. They said we were hostiles, we were families, old people, children. Ethan's world tilted. Red Canyon. The name from his nightmares. They burned everything, Tan continued. My brother, his wife, most of our people. Dia and I escaped. We have been running since. Dia was watching Ethan's face. She saw something there that made her eyes narrow. You know this place, she said slowly. Red Canyon. Ethan could not speak, could not breathe. The walls of the barn seemed to close in. He saw flames, heard screaming, felt the weight of a small girl in his arms. "You were there," Dia whispered. It was not a question. The truth was a stone in Ethan's throat. He wanted to deny it, wanted to lie. But he had lied enough for one lifetime. Yes, the single word fell between them like a corpse. Ton's hand moved toward his knife. Dia put a hand on his arm, stopping him. Her face had gone very still, very cold. "What did you do there?" she asked. Ethan met her eyes. He owed her this much, the truth no matter how it destroyed him. "I was Sergeant Thornhill's 7th Cavalry. We were ordered to clear hostile territory. Command said you were warriors. You were not. I tried to stop it. I pulled 3 children out before the fires. I was court-martialed for insubordination, dishonorably discharged." He paused, swallowed. "I do not know if your family was among them. I do not know if I saved anyone you loved or failed to." Silence filled the barn. Outside the wind howled. Inside 3 people stood frozen in a tableau of pain. Dia spoke finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My sister. Nietzsche. She was 7. She died 2 weeks after the massacre. Injuries from the fire." Ethan closed his eyes. Another name for the list of ghosts. But she died free. Dia continued. "Someone pulled her out, saved her from burning. She told me before she died. A soldier said shoot to her." Ethan's eyes opened. His hand moved to his pocket almost without thought. He pulled out a small object, a chip of turquoise worn smooth. He had carried it for 3 years. "A little girl gave this to me," he said. "Before I left the canyon, she said thank you in Apache." Dia stared at the stone. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. When she touched it, a sound came from her throat. Half sob, half gasp. That was Nietzsche's. Our mother's bracelet. It broke in the fire. The turquoise lay between them. A bridge across an ocean of pain. Ton spoke, his voice rough. "You saved my niece's sister." "I was too late," Ethan said. "But you tried." Ton's expression was unreadable. "That is more than most." Dia looked up at Ethan. Tears tracked down her face, but her eyes were not soft. They were hard and bright and full of something complex. Anger, grief, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. From the barn door a small voice spoke. "Please do not go." They all turned. Samuel stood there in his nightshirt, bare feet on the cold ground. He looked at Dia with desperation written across his young face. "Please," he said again. His voice broke. "I do not want you to die like Mama." Dia's expression crumpled. She crossed the distance and knelt in front of the boy. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "I am not going anywhere. Not yet." Samuel threw his arms around her neck. She held him, and over his head her eyes found Ethan's. What they saw in each other's faces was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was acknowledgement of pain shared, of losses that could never be repaired, of the terrible, fragile chance to choose something different. Tan lowered himself to sit against the wall. "For now we stay." Ethan nodded. He looked at the 3 of them, an Apache warrior, a woman whose family he had failed to save, a boy who had already lost too much, and himself, a former soldier, a failed protector, a man trying desperately to be someone different than who he had been. The snow continued to fall outside, the wind continued to howl, and inside the barn, in the warm glow of lamplight, 4 people sat together in the ruins of their separate griefs, bound now by truth and turquoise and the faint, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, the past did not have to be the only thing that defined them. Dawn would bring new problems, new dangers. The cavalry would return. The world outside would not simply allow this fragile peace to exist. But for now, in this moment, they had made a choice. To stay. To try. To see if broken things could be made whole again, or at least whole enough to keep going. Ethan looked at Dia. She looked back. Neither smiled. But something passed between them that felt like the beginning of something. Not trust. Not yet. But the possibility of it. the first crack in the walls they had both built around their hearts. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Thornhill felt something other than guilt. He felt almost human again. The first week passed like walking on ice over deep water, every step careful, every movement measured. Ethan, Tan, and Samuel existed in the same space but orbited each other like planets afraid of collision. Tan slept in the barn, rising before dawn to work. He never asked what needed doing. He simply found the broken things and fixed them. The fence that had sagged for months stood straight again. The loose boards on the barn door fit tight. The axe that had dulled from years of use sang sharp against the whetstone. He worked with an intensity that Ethan recognized. The same desperate energy Ethan poured into his own labor. Work as escape, work as penance, work as the only prayer that made sense anymore. They barely spoke. Ethan would nod when Tan arrived at the woodpile. Tan would nod back. That was enough. Two men who understood that sometimes silence was the only honest conversation. But Ethan watched, saw how Tan's hands never strayed far from his knife, saw how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, a warrior's habits, the kind that kept you alive when the world wanted you dead. Ethan knew those habits. He had worn them like a second skin for years. Samuel had become Tan's shadow. The boy followed the Apache warrior everywhere, absorbing lessons without words. How to approach a horse so it would not spook. How to read the sky for weather. How to move through brush without sound. Tan taught with patience that surprised Ethan. The warrior would kneel to Samuel's height, demonstrate slowly, then step back and let the boy try. When Samuel succeeded, Tan would place a hand on his shoulder. A brief touch, approval given in gesture rather than words. Samuel glowed under that attention in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. His son needed a father who was present, not a ghost haunted by flames and screaming. Dia remained a mystery. She moved through her days with quiet efficiency, cooking meals that somehow stretched their meager supplies further than Ethan had managed alone, mending clothes with stitches so small they were nearly invisible, teaching Samuel words in Apache and Spanish, her voice soft in the evening light. She rarely looked at Ethan directly. When she did, her eyes carried questions she did not ask. He was grateful for that. He had no answers that would satisfy either of them. But there were moments, small fractures in the careful distance they maintained. One morning Ethan found her struggling with the water pump. The mechanism had frozen overnight and needed to be thawed and primed. He approached slowly, hands visible, and showed her the trick of it. Pour a little warm water down the throat first. Work the handle gently until it catches. Their hands touched on the pump handle, just for a second. Both pulled back as if burned. But in that brief contact, Ethan felt warmth that had nothing to do with the water. Another day he came back from checking the northern fence line to find Dia in the barn treating one of the horses for a stone bruise. She had made a poultice from desert plants he did not recognize. The horse stood calm under her hands, trusting in a way it never did with Ethan. "What is that?" he asked. She glanced up, surprised to find him there. "Yerba mansa. Grows near water. Good for swelling. I did not know it grew here. Most people do not look." She returned her attention to the horse's hoof. Her fingers worked the poultice into the tender spot with practiced care. "My mother taught me. Before." The last word hung heavy. Before the massacre. Before running. Before everything broke. Ethan wanted to say something, wanted to bridge the canyon between them, but the words stuck in his throat like stones. So he simply stood there watching her gentle hands heal until she finished and walked away without another word. That night Samuel asked if Dia could stay forever. They were sitting at the dinner table, the four of them. It was the first time they had all eaten together inside the house. Dia had been reluctant, but the temperature had dropped below freezing, and Ethan had insisted. The barn was no place to eat in weather like this. The boys' question fell into silence. Everyone stopped eating. Ethan did not know what to say. Tan's expression went carefully blank. Dia looked at her plate. Samuel's face crumpled. "I am sorry. I should not have asked." Dia reached across the table and took the boy's hand. Her voice was gentle. "You can always ask Pequeño. Always." "But you are going to leave," Samuel whispered. "Everyone leaves." The pain in those words cut deeper than any knife. Ethan saw his son's grief laid bare, saw how the boy had learned too young that love meant loss, that attachment led to abandonment. No one answered Samuel's unspoken question, because they all knew the truth. This arrangement could not last. The cavalry would return. The winter would end. Reality would come calling, and when it did, there would be no place for an Apache woman and warrior on a white man's ranch. But for tonight they sat together in the warm glow of lamplight and pretended that maybe, just maybe, the world outside could be kept at bay. 2 weeks after Ton's arrival, the routines had solidified into something almost comfortable. Ethan and Ton worked the ranch together, communicating in grunts and gestures. Samuel split his time between helping and learning, his young face more animated than Ethan had seen in years. Dia moved between barn and house like a ghost present, but not quite belonging to either space. It was fragile, but it was more than Ethan had hoped for. Then the railroad came. Ethan saw the dust first. Multiple horses moving slowly, pulling something heavy. He was repairing the corral when they crested the rise. 3 wagons, a dozen men, all wearing the self-important expressions of people who believed they owned the future. He set down his tools and walked toward the house. Ton appeared from the barn, knife at his belt, eyes sharp. Dia pulled Samuel inside without being asked. The wagon stopped 50 yards from the house. A man climbed down from the lead wagon. 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of belly that came from sitting in offices while other men did the real work. He approached with his hand extended, a smile that showed too many teeth. "Mr. Thornhill, I presume? I am Marcus Hackett, Chief Surveyor for the Continental Pacific Railroad." Ethan did not take the offered hand. "What do you want?" Hackett's smile never wavered. He lowered his hand slowly. "Direct. I appreciate that. I am here to make you an offer on your land." "Not interested." "You have not heard the terms. Do not need to. This land is not for sale." Hackett looked around the property. The small house, the struggling garden plot, the corral that needed constant repair. His expression said clearly what he thought of what he saw. "Mr. Thornhill, let me be frank. The railroad is coming through here whether you cooperate or not. We have government contracts. Eminent domain if necessary. But I prefer to handle these matters civilly. I am prepared to offer you $3,000 for this property. That is more than generous given its current state." $3,000. It was more money than Ethan would see in 5 years of ranching this hard-scrabble land. Enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere Samuel could have a real future instead of slow starvation on dying soil. I said no. Hackett's smile tightened at the edges. "You are making a mistake. That seems to be my specialty." One of the surveyors had started setting up equipment, preparing to measure and mark. Tan appeared beside Ethan, silent as smoke. The surveyor saw him and froze. An Apache warrior, armed, standing protective beside a white rancher. It did not fit the usual script. Hackett noticed the surveyor's hesitation and turned. His eyes landed on Tan. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite fear, more like calculation. "You are harboring a hostile," Hackett said quietly. "The cavalry will want to know about this. He is helping with the ranch work." Ethan's voice stayed flat. "Nothing illegal about hiring help." "Apache help?" Hackett's eyebrows rose. "I am sure Lieutenant Creed would be fascinated to learn you are employing the very people he is trying to relocate." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. "Get off my land," Ethan said. Hackett held his gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled again, and this time there was no pretense of warmth. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Thornhill. I will find yours." He climbed back into his wagon. The surveyors packed their equipment with nervous speed. Within minutes they were gone, leaving only dust and the sour taste of threat in the air. Ton watched them disappear over the rise. "They will tell the cavalry." "I know. Then we should leave. Tonight." Ethan turned to look at the warrior. For the first time they made real eye contact. 2 men who had both seen too much, both lost too much. If you run now, you will be running forever. Ton's jaw tightened. Better than dying here. Maybe. Ethan looked back at the house where Dia and Samuel watched from the window. Or maybe some things are worth standing for. They stood in silence. Two men on opposite sides of a war, neither had wanted united now by the simple fact that the world kept trying to take everything from them. That night, the four of them sat by the fire outside the barn. It was cold enough that their breath made clouds, but the stars were so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Dia had started the fire with practiced ease, building it the Apache way with careful attention to smoke and heat. Samuel sat close to her, wrapped in a blanket. Tan sat across from them, cleaning his knife in long meditative strokes. Ethan found himself between them all, neither part of one world nor the other. Dia broke the silence. "Tell me about the railroad." Ethan explained what he knew. The continental expansion, the government contracts, the way rail companies were buying or seizing land across the territory, building toward a future that had no room for people like them. Small ranchers, Apache, anyone who stood in the way of progress. "They will not stop," Dia said. It was not a question. No. And the cavalry, they will help the railroad clear obstacles. The government wants settlements, wants the land productive. People like Hackett pay well for that kind of assistance. Tan spat into the fire. The army serves money now, not honor. Did it ever serve honor? The question came out before Ethan could stop it. He thought of Red Canyon, of orders followed, of children burning. Tan looked at him with something that might have been understanding. No. But we told ourselves it did, made it easier to kill. The truth of that settled over them. Two warriors on opposite sides, both realizing too late that the war had never been about honor. Just land, just money, just the endless hunger of empire. Samuel spoke up, his young voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Dia tells stories about the stars. Did you know that?" Ethan looked at her. She was watching the fire, her face unreadable. "I did not know." "Tell him," Samuel urged. "Tell about Coyote." Dia hesitated. Then, perhaps because the night was dark and the fire was warm and they were all trapped together anyway, she began to speak. Her voice changed when she told stories, became something older, something that carried the weight of generations. She spoke of Coyote, the trickster who stole fire from the gods to give to humans, how he was punished but never regretted his choice, how his children still howled at the night sky remembering. Ethan listened and heard more than the story. He heard the message underneath, about choices that cost everything, about gifts given despite punishment, about remembering who you were even when the world wanted you to forget. When she finished, Samuel was half asleep, his head resting against her shoulder. Tan had stopped cleaning his knife. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter, as if listening. "My mother told me that story," Dia said softly, "the night before the soldiers came." Ethan wanted to say something, wanted to tell her he was sorry, but sorry was too small a word, too useless. What good were apologies for ashes and blood? Instead he stood and added wood to the fire, small pieces that would burn slow and steady. Dia watched his hands as he worked. When he sat back down, she was still watching. Their eyes met across the flames. Neither looked away. The moment stretched heavy with things unsaid. Then Samuel shifted in his sleep, and the spell broke. The days continued. The fragile peace held. But underneath, everyone felt the pressure building, like storm clouds gathering on a horizon only they could see. 3 days after Hackett's visit, Samuel found the trunk. Ethan had gone to check the fence line. Tan was working on the roof, replacing shingles damaged by winter storms. Dia was cooking. The boy was supposed to be doing his lessons, practicing the letters Dia had been teaching him. Instead, he had climbed into the attic. The trunk was old, buried under moth-eaten blankets and broken furniture Ethan kept meaning to repair. Samuel pulled it out, curious about what his father kept hidden. The lock was rusted through. It opened with barely any pressure. Inside, folded with military precision, was a cavalry uniform. The blue wool was faded but intact. The brass buttons still held their dull shine. and beneath the uniform wrapped in oilcloth was a journal. Samuel brought them down to show Dia. He did not know what they meant, just knew they were old and his father's, and maybe she would find them interesting. Dia was stirring beans over the stove when Samuel appeared with his findings. Her eyes landed on the uniform and she went very still. "Where did you find this?" "In the attic." Samuel held up the journal. "There are words in here. Can you read them?" Dia set down the spoon. Her hands were steady as she took the journal, but something in her face had changed, gone sharp and cold and dangerous. She opened to a random page. Her eyes scanned the text, then stopped. She read more slowly. Her breathing changed. Samuel watched, confused. "Is something wrong?" Dia did not answer. She turned pages, read entries written in Ethan's careful hand, dates, locations, details of patrol routes and engagements. And there in the middle of June 1879, several pages devoted to an operation near Red Canyon. Orders received to clear hostile territory. Scouts report Apache encampment estimated 40 warriors. Colonel wants them relocated or eliminated. We ride at dawn. She kept reading. Her hands began to shake. Engaged Apache at Red Canyon. Not warriors. Families. Old people. Children. I tried to stop it. Captain threatened court-martial. Orders are orders. The next entry was written in a different hand. Shaky, as if the writer could barely hold the pen. Pulled 3 children from the fires. Maybe saved them. Maybe just prolonged their dying. Sergeant Thornhill relieved of duty, pending investigation for insubordination and cowardice in the face of the enemy. Dia closed the journal, set it on the table with careful precision. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Samuel, go outside. But go." The boy fled. He had learned to recognize that tone, the one adults used when something was breaking and children needed to be elsewhere. Dia stood in the kitchen holding a journal that proved what she had already known, but somehow needed to see written. Ethan Thornhill had been there, had been part of it, had followed orders to destroy her people. She heard the door open behind her, knew without looking that it was him, probably heard Samuel running, probably knew what the boy had found. "You were there." Her voice was quiet. Ethan had learned that quiet was more dangerous than shouting. He stood in the doorway covered in dust from the fence line and looked at the uniform and journal spread on his kitchen table. The evidence of who he had been. "Yes." Dia turned to face him. Her eyes were dry now. Hard. How many, what? How many of my people did you kill?" Ethan felt the question like a blow to the chest. "I do not know. I stopped counting after Red Canyon." The truth sat between them, ugly and undeniable. "You told me you tried to stop it," Dia said. "You told me you saved children, but you were still there. You still came. You still followed orders. Yes. That is all you have to say. Yes." Her voice rose now, the careful control cracking. Ethan saw Ton appear in the doorway behind her, knife-drawn eyes assessing the threat. Samuel stood further back, his face pale. "What do you want me to say?" Ethan's voice stayed level. "That I was young, that I believed in duty, that I thought I was protecting settlers? Those are all true. They are also all excuses. I was there. I was part of it. Nothing I say changes that." Dia stared at him. "You do not even defend yourself. There is no defense." The silence that followed was the kind that comes before violence or before breaking. Ton shifted his weight, ready to intervene. Samuel made a small sound in his throat. Dia moved suddenly, crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. For a moment Ethan thought she might hit him, almost hoped she would. Pain he could understand. Instead, she stopped inches from him and spoke so quietly only he could hear. "One of the children you saved. The journal mentions 3. One had a turquoise bracelet." Ethan's breath caught. He knew where this was going. Had known from the moment he saw recognition in her eyes weeks ago. "That was my sister, Naichi. She was 7. She died 2 weeks later from her injuries. But before she died, she told me about the soldier who pulled her from the fire." Who said shoo? Who tried? Her hand came up, not to hit, to touch his face. Her fingers traced the scar on his cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I have hated that soldier every day since, and now I find out he is you. Ethan could not move, could not breathe. Her touch burned worse than any flame. I do not know what to do with that, she whispered. I do not know how to hate you and be grateful at the same time. You do not have to choose, Ethan said. You can hate me. You should, but I do not. Her voice broke. I want to. God knows I want to. But when I look at you, all I see is a man carrying the same weight I carry. She dropped her hand, stepped back. The space between them felt like miles. Tan spoke from the doorway. We should leave. Tonight. Dia did not look away from Ethan. Yes, we should. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. Tan followed. Samuel remained frozen, looking between his father and the closing door. Pa, go to your room, Samuel. But now. The boy fled. Ethan stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of who he had been. A uniform he could never wear again, a journal full of crimes he could never undo, and the memory of Dia's touch, both accusation and absolution. He sat at the table as night fell, did not light a lamp, did not move, just sat in the darkness with his ghosts. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time felt broken. Then he heard it, the soft sound of a door closing, footsteps in the yard, 2 sets, Dia and Tan leaving under cover of darkness. Ethan did not try to stop them. What right did he have? He sat until dawn. Light crept through the windows, gray and cold. Then he stood body stiff from sitting and walked outside. The barn door stood open. They were gone. He had expected that. What he had not expected was the emptiness it left behind. The ranch suddenly felt enormous and hollow, a place built for people who were no longer there. Samuel emerged from the house, his eyes red from crying. They gone. Ethan nodded. The boy's face crumpled. He ran back inside. Ethan heard the door to his room slam. He stood in the yard as the sun rose over the Badlands, painting the rocks gold and red, beautiful and indifferent. The world did not care about his pain, did not care about any of them. He made himself move. There was work to do. The ranch did not stop needing care just because his heart had broken again. He was halfway to the barn when he saw them, 2 figures at the creek bed, the same place he had found Dia all those weeks ago. They sat on the bank, facing away from the ranch, waiting. Ethan walked toward them slowly. Each step felt like a choice, to engage, to try, to risk more pain. Tan saw him first, rose to his feet, hand on his knife. Dia remained sitting, her back straight, her face unreadable. Ethan stopped 10 feet away, said nothing. The morning wind moved through the scrub brush, the only sound in the vast silence. Tan spoke first. My niece asked me a question last night. If the cavalry comes again, what will you choose? Ethan looked at Dia. She was watching him now, her dark eyes searching his face for something. Truth, maybe, or proof that he was more than his worst moments. I chose when I pulled those children from the fire, Ethan said. I chose when I lied to Creed. I chose when I let you stay. I would choose again. The words fell into the space between them. Not begging, not promising, just stating fact. Tan cleared his throat. The railroad will come back. The cavalry, too. They will not let us stay. I know, Ethan said. So what do? We stand, or we run. Either way, I am done making decisions alone. He looked at Dia, at Tan, at the vast empty land around them. This is not just my ranch anymore. It stopped being that the moment I pulled you from this creek. So you decide, both of you. Stay or go. I will follow either choice. Dia stepped forward, closed the distance between them until she stood close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, close enough to see the scars that matched his own. If we stay, she said quietly, the world will try to destroy us. It will try regardless." She almost smiled. "You are not good at being reassuring. Never learned how." This time she did smile, small and sad and genuine. "We will stay. For now." The weight that had been pressing on Ethan's chest since last night lifted slightly. Not gone. Never gone. But manageable. Dia reached into the pocket of her dress. Her fingers closed around something she had carried every day since Naichi died. She pulled it out. A piece of turquoise, small and irregular, worn smooth by years of holding, touching, remembering. "My mother's bracelet," she said quietly. "It broke in the fire at Red Canyon. Naichi kept one piece, I kept the other. This is all I have left of her." She held it in her palm, the morning sun catching the blue-green stone. Ethan's hand moved to his pocket before he could think, before he could stop himself. His fingers found the small stone he had carried for 6 months, the one a little girl had pressed into his hand before the smoke took her from view. He pulled it out. Dia's eyes widened. Her breath caught. The two pieces were unmistakable, chipped from the same bracelet, the same stone. One half of a whole broken by fire carried separately by two people who had both loved the same child. "You have it," Dia whispered. Her voice shook. "You have Naichi's piece." "She gave it to me," Ethan said. His own voice was rough. "Before I left the canyon. She said, 'Shoo, thank you.' I've carried it every day since." Dia took both pieces, fit them together in her palm. They matched perfectly, the break line visible, but the whole reconstituted, two fragments reunited. Tears streamed down her face. She died knowing someone cared, Dia said, her words breaking. She died knowing a soldier tried to save her. "That has to matter." "It matters," Ethan said fiercely. "It has to." Dia looked up at him. In her eyes he saw everything. The pain, the grief, the slow, impossible beginning of forgiveness. "I don't know how to hate you and be grateful at the same time," she whispered. "You don't have to choose." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her breath, see the tears on her cheeks, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hand, still holding both pieces of turquoise, reached up and touched his face. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you. I choose us. Despite everything, because of everything." The kiss was inevitable, necessary. Two broken people reaching for each other across an ocean of pain and finding somehow that the distance was not as far as they had feared. The weight that had been pressing on Ethan's chest since last night lifted slightly. Not gone. Never gone. But manageable. Movement from the direction of the house caught his eye. Samuel running toward them, arms pumping, face split in a grin. The boy launched himself at Dia, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You came back." She stumbled slightly, then steadied. Her hand came down to rest on Samuel's head, fingers gentle in his hair. "I came back." Over the boy's head, her eyes met Ethan's. In that look he saw everything they had not said. The fear, the hope, the terrible fragile possibility that maybe broken things could be made to fit together in new shapes. Tan watched them all with an expression caught between resignation and something that might have been approval. "If we are staying," he said, "we need defenses. The railroad will return, and they will bring the cavalry." Ethan nodded. "Then we prepare." The four of them walked back to the ranch together. Samuel between Dia and Ethan. Ton ranging slightly ahead, already scanning for threats, already planning. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving. Somewhere out there, men were making plans to take everything from them. The railroad, the army, the inexorable march of a future that had no room for people who refused to move. But for now, in this moment, they had made a choice. To stay. To try, to see if four broken people could build something stronger than the sum of their separate wounds. It would not be easy. It might not even be possible. But standing there in the morning light, looking at the small ranch that had somehow become worth defending, Ethan felt something he had not felt in 3 years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he deserved a chance at redemption. And maybe, just maybe, he was not alone in needing one. The pieces of turquoise caught the sunlight as they walked two fragments of a broken whole carried separately but moving toward the same destination. Behind them the creek bed where everything had started lay empty and quiet, already filling with dust. Ahead, the ranch waited, small and struggling and theirs. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That had to be enough. For now, it was everything. The first warm day came in late March, arriving like a gift no one had expected. The morning sun rose with actual heat behind it, burning away the frost that had gripped the land for months. Ethan stood on the porch watching ice melt from the eaves, each drop catching light as it fell. Winter was losing its grip. Spring was coming whether they were ready or not. A month had passed since the morning at the creek bed. A month of careful coexistence that had slowly, almost imperceptibly transformed into something else. Something that felt dangerously close to family. Tan had proven himself indispensable. The warrior worked with a focus that bordered on obsessive, as if staying busy kept darker thoughts at bay. The barn roof no longer leaked. The fence posts stood straight and strong. The garden plot had been expanded and prepared for planting, the soil turned and enriched with compost. Tan had somehow coaxed from desert scrub and horse manure. He and Ethan had developed a language without words. A gesture toward the woodpile meant it needed splitting. A nod toward the horses meant time to check their hooves. They moved around each other with the efficiency of men who had learned to read intention in small movements. Warriors from opposite sides of a war finding common ground in the simple work of keeping a ranch alive. Samuel had bloomed under the attention of two father figures. The quiet, withdrawn boy had begun to laugh again. Real laughter that came from his belly, not the polite sounds children made when they thought adults expected it. He spent his mornings with Tan learning to track and hunt and read the land, his afternoons with Dia learning letters and numbers and the songs of her people, his evenings with Ethan finally able to talk about his mother without the conversation ending in painful silence. The boy was healing. That alone made everything else worthwhile. But it was Dia who had changed things most. Her presence had transformed the ranch from a place of exile into something that almost resembled a home. She moved through the spaces Ethan had occupied alone for so long and somehow made them feel less empty. The kitchen smelled of cooking. Now not just burnt coffee and old grease, the floors were swept. The windows let in light that had been dimmed by years of accumulated dust. Small changes. But they accumulated into something larger, into the feeling that life was being lived here again, not just endured. Ethan found himself watching her when he thought she would not notice. The way she moved, economical and graceful. The way her hands shaped tortillas with practiced rhythm. The way she sang under her breath while working songs in Apache and Spanish that he did not understand but found beautiful anyway. Sometimes she caught him looking. When she did, she would hold his gaze for a moment before looking away. No smile, no acknowledgement, just that brief connection that sent heat through his chest. They had not spoken of the journal since that day, had not discussed Red Canyon or Nietzsche or the weight of history that lay between them. Some things were too heavy for words. They existed in the space of small gestures instead. A cup of coffee left where he would find it, a shawl draped over her shoulders when evening cold settled in, proximity chosen rather than avoided. One evening Ethan was teaching Samuel how to clean his rifle properly when Dia appeared in the doorway. She watched for a moment, then spoke. "You are teaching him to kill." It was not quite an accusation, more an observation waiting to become one. "I am teaching him to survive," Ethan replied. "There is a difference." "Is there?" She stepped into the room. "In my experience, those who survive do so by being better at killing than those who die." Samuel looked between them uncertain. Ethan set down the cleaning rod and met Dia's eyes. "I am teaching him to protect himself, to protect what matters. If that requires killing, then yes, I am teaching him that too. But I am also teaching him when not to pull the trigger. That is the harder lesson." Dia considered this. After a long moment she nodded. "Then teach him both. The world will try to teach him only one." She left without another word. But something had shifted in that exchange. An understanding reached. She was not asking him to be other than what he was, just asking him to be aware of what he was teaching. Later that night, after Samuel had gone to bed, Ethan found Dia outside. She sat on the edge of the porch wrapped in a blanket, looking at stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear desert air. He sat beside her, leaving space between them. For a while neither spoke. The silence was comfortable now, companionable. Dia broke it first. "Tell me about your wife." The question surprised him. "Sarah." He rarely spoke her name aloud. It felt like invoking a ghost. "What do you want to know? What she was like, whether you loved her?" Ethan thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated. Sarah had been a good woman, kind, patient with his silences and nightmares. But their marriage had been born of practicality more than passion. Two lonely people finding shelter in each other. "I cared for her," he said finally. "She deserved better than what I could give. Better than dying alone trying to birth my child. You carry that weight too." It was not a question. Ethan nodded. "Too many weights," Dia said quietly. "How do you stand under them all? I do not know that I do. Most days I just keep moving because stopping means thinking." She turned to look at him. Even in starlight her eyes were luminous. "That is not living. That is just surviving." "Is there a difference?" "Yes." She shifted closer, closing some of the distance between them. "Surviving is breathing. Living is choosing what you breathe for." The nearness of her made something in Ethan's chest constrict. He could smell the smoke from the fire on her clothes, could feel the warmth of her even through the blanket. "What do you breathe for?" he asked. Dia did not answer immediately. She looked back at the stars, her profile sharp against the night sky. "I used to breathe for revenge," she said, "for the chance to make someone pay for what was taken. Then I met a boy who needed a mother, and a man who needed to stop punishing himself. And I realized maybe breathing for them was enough." She looked at him again. Her hand moved slightly, fingers brushing his on the wooden planks between them. The touch was brief, electric. "What do you breathe for Ethan Thornhill?" He looked at her hand so close to his, at her face open and vulnerable in a way he had never seen, at the future that was suddenly terrifyingly possible if he was brave enough to reach for it. "I am starting to remember," he said quietly. Their fingers touched again. This time neither pulled away. They sat like that for a long time, hands barely connected, breathing the same cold air until Dia finally stood and went inside. Ethan remained on the porch, his hand still warm where hers had been, and felt something he had thought dead wake inside his chest. Hope was a dangerous thing, but God help him, he felt it anyway. The days grew longer and warmer. The land began to show green in places it had been brown. Tan planted seeds in the expanded garden. Samuel helped his small hands, learning the rhythm of making things grow. Dia taught them songs to sing while planting, Apache songs about earth and water and the patience required to coax life from stone. Ethan watched them work and felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly. This was what he had been missing. Not just company, not just help with the ranch, but the feeling of being part of something larger than his own guilt and isolation. One afternoon he and Dia were hanging wash on the line strung between two posts. The wind caught a sheet and it billowed between them like a sail. When it settled, she was closer than she had been, close enough that he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. The small scar on her chin he had never noticed before. "You are staring," she said. "I know." "Why?" "Because you are beautiful." The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest and completely unguarded. Dia froze, the sheet forgotten in her hands. "You should not say things like that." "Why not?" "It is true." "Because—" She looked away. "Because I do not know what to do when you say them." Ethan reached up and gently turned her face back toward him. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. She did not pull away. "You do not have to do anything," he said. "I am just telling you what I see." For a long moment they stood like that. The world narrowed to the space between them. to the warmth of her skin under his hand, to the way her breath caught when he leaned closer. Then Samuel's voice shattered the moment. "Patan says there are riders coming. They broke apart as if burned." Ethan's hand fell to his side. Dia turned away, but not before he saw color rising in her cheeks. The moment was gone, but it had existed. That mattered. Ethan ran toward where Ton stood at the edge of the property, one hand shading his eyes as he scanned the horizon. Samuel bounced beside him, excited and scared in equal measure. "There," Ton pointed. Ethan saw the dust cloud, multiple riders moving fast. His stomach dropped. This was not a casual visit. "Get inside," he told Samuel. "Now." "But Pa—" "Now." The boy fled. Dia appeared beside Ethan, her face calm but her body tense. "Ready." "How many?" she asked Ton. 6, maybe 7. Military formation. Ethan felt ice slide down his spine. Creed. It had to be. The lieutenant had said he would return. Ethan had hoped for more time. Hope was always a mistake. The three of them stood together as the riders approached. When they were close enough to make out details, Ethan's worst fear was confirmed. Lieutenant Creed rode at the front, his face harder than Ethan remembered. Behind him, 5 soldiers, all armed. But there was a 7th rider. Marcus Hackett, the railroad man, looking smug and self-satisfied on an expensive horse that was too clean for desert travel. The riders stopped 20 yards from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to draw weapons if needed. Creed dismounted slowly, his eyes taking in everything. The repaired barn, the expanded garden, the 3 people standing together in defiance. His gaze lingered on Ton, on the knife at his belt, on the way he stood like a man ready to die fighting. "Thornhill," Creed said. His voice carried the weight of official authority. "I am here on behalf of the Continental Pacific Railroad and the United States Army." Ethan said nothing. "Mr. Hackett has filed a claim on this land. He has government contracts supporting his right to purchase. You have 48 hours to accept his offer and vacate the premises." Ethan felt Dia tense beside him. Ton's hand moved incrementally closer to his knife. "And if I refuse?" Ethan kept his voice level. Creed's expression did not change. "Then you will be removed as a squatter on federal land, by force if necessary. This is my land. I have the deed." Hackett spoke up, his voice oily with false sympathy. "Deeds can be challenged, Mr. Thornhill, especially when the title holder is harboring hostile Indians. That makes you an enemy combatant. Enemy combatants have no property rights." The trap was elegant. Ethan had to give them that. Harbor Dia and Ton, lose the land. Give them up, keep the land, but lose his soul. Again. Creed's eyes moved to Ton. "That man is wanted for escaping federal custody. The woman, too. Turn them over now, and maybe we can work something out regarding your property." Ethan did not hesitate. "No." Creed's jaw tightened. "You are making a grave mistake. That seems to be my specialty." For a long moment no one moved. The tension pulled tight as a wire. One wrong word would snap it. Then Creed remounted his horse. 48 hours, Thornhill. After that we come back with enough men to burn this place to the ground if we have to. Choose wisely." The riders left at the same measured pace they had arrived, confident, in control, already certain of their victory. When they were out of sight, Ton spoke. "We leave tonight. Draw them away from here." Ethan shook his head. "They will still take the land. Better than all of us dying for it. Some things are worth dying for." Dia put her hand on Ethan's arm. "He is right. If we stay, they will kill us all, including Samuel." The mention of his son cut through Ethan's resolve. She was right. He could not sacrifice Samuel for his own stubborn pride, could not make the boy an orphan to prove a point. That night they sat around the kitchen table planning. Maps spread out, supplies calculated, routes debated. Ton knew the land between here and the Mexican border. 3 days hard riding through territory the army rarely patrolled. They could make it. Maybe. Samuel sat in the corner, too quiet. He understood what was happening even if no one spoke it directly. They were leaving. The only home he had ever known would be abandoned to the railroad and its hired guns. Ethan looked at his son's face and felt his heart break. Again. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I tried to give you something permanent." Samuel met his eyes. His voice was small but steady. "You gave me them. That is more permanent than land." The boy's wisdom shamed him. An 8-year-old child understood what Ethan had taken years to learn, that people mattered more than places, that what you carried in your heart weighed more than what you built with your hands. The knock came near midnight. Everyone froze. Ton's hand went to his knife. Dia moved toward Samuel. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Through the window he could see a single figure. Not soldiers, not Hackett's men, someone else. He opened the door with the rifle raised. The man on his porch wore civilian clothes but had a military bearing, 50s weathered face, eyes that had seen things. He raised his hands slowly. "Ethan Thornhill." "Who is asking?" "My name is James Burke. I am the territorial sheriff out of Santa Fe. May I come in?" Ethan hesitated, then lowered the rifle slightly and stepped aside. Burke entered and took in the scene. The maps on the table, the supplies being packed, the Apache warrior with a knife, the woman and child standing protective of each other. His expression gave nothing away. "You are planning to run," he observed. "We are planning to not die," Dia said sharply. Burke looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Smart. Lieutenant Creed has a reputation for burning first and asking questions never." He turned to Ethan. "I came to warn you. Creed is not acting on official Army orders. He is being paid by Hackett to clear this land. The railroad wants it bad enough to commit murder for it." "Why are you telling us this?" Ethan asked. "Because I was at Red Canyon," Burke said quietly. "Not as part of the action, as the investigator sent afterward. I read the reports. I know what you tried to do, how you were punished for having a conscience." He paused. "I am tired of watching good people get destroyed by corrupt ones. So I am here to offer you another option." "What option?" Ton demanded. "We fight." Burke pulled papers from his coat. "I have evidence that Hackett has been bribing Army officers, that Creed has been using his position for personal profit. I have been gathering it for months. If we can hold them off for 48 hours, I can get federal marshals here. Real law, not Hackett's bought soldiers." It was insane. It was impossible. It was also the first real hope they had been offered. "What do you need from us?" Ethan asked. "Hold the line." Burke's eyes were hard. "Whatever it takes." That night they planned differently. Not escape routes, but defense. Tan knew guerrilla tactics. Burke knew military strategy. Together they turned the small ranch into something that could be defended. Trenches dug at key approach points, traps set along likely cavalry routes, supplies moved to defensible positions, the barn and house fortified with whatever materials they could scrounge. Dia worked alongside the men, her hands quick and sure. When Ethan tried to suggest she and Samuel should hide in the root cellar during the fight, she gave him a look that could have cut steel. "I survived Red Canyon. I survived months of running. You think I am going to hide while men fight for my right to exist?" Ethan recognized the futility of arguing. Instead, he showed her how to load and fire his spare rifle. She learned fast. Her hands remembered violence, even if she wished they did not. Samuel they could not protect from the truth. The boy was old enough to understand that tomorrow might bring death. Dia sat with him in his room singing the soft Apache songs that always calmed him. Ethan stood in the doorway watching, memorizing the scene in case it was the last peaceful moment they ever had. Later, after Samuel finally slept, Ethan found Dia on the porch again. Their place now, where truth was spoken under stars that kept secrets. He sat beside her, closer than before. Their shoulders touched. "If we do not survive tomorrow," he said, "there is something I need to tell you. Do not." Her voice was fierce. "Do not speak of dying. Not tonight." "Then what should I speak of?" She turned to face him. Her hand came up to cup his face, mirroring the gesture he had made weeks ago. "Tell me that this mattered, that these months were real." They were real. He covered her hand with his. "You are real. What I feel is real." "Say it," she whispered. "Whatever it is you feel, say it now while we still can. I love you." The words came out rough, unpracticed, true. "I love you, and I am terrified of losing you before I even really had you." Dia's eyes were wet. "You had me the moment you spoke my language. You just did not know it yet." She kissed him then, soft at first, tentative like two people learning a new language, then deeper, desperate, tasting of salt and smoke and everything they had been too afraid to reach for. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive this—" "When we survive this," she corrected. "When we survive this, I want to do this properly. I want to ask you the right way." She smiled against his lips. "Apache do not need asking. We just decide. Then, decide. I already have." They kissed again, and this time there was no hesitation. No fear. Just two people choosing each other against a world that wanted to keep them apart. The dawn came too soon, and not soon enough. Ethan woke to Tan's hand on his shoulder. The warrior's face was grim. "They are here." Ethan rose, every muscle already tight with adrenaline. He had slept in his clothes boots on rifle within reach, the habits of war coming back like muscle memory. Outside the horizon showed dust, multiple columns, more than 6 riders. Creed had brought reinforcements. Burke appeared from the barnfield, glasses in hand. 20 men, maybe more. He did not sound afraid, just resigned. "We are outnumbered 4-1. Apache have won with worse odds," Tan said. They took their positions, Ethan and Burke in the house covering the front approach, Tan in the barn with sight lines on the flanks, Dia in the root cellar with Samuel a rifle in her hands and instructions to shoot anyone who was not them. The riders approached slowly, Creed at the front, his face hard. Behind him a mix of cavalry and what looked like hired guns, men who killed for money and called it justice. They stopped out of easy rifle range. Creed dismounted and walked forward alone. Arrogant or brave, Ethan could not tell. "Thornhill." The lieutenant's voice carried across the open ground. "Your time is up. Come out. Surrender the hostiles. You can still walk away from this." Ethan showed himself at the window. His rifle was visible, his intention clear. "The only hostile I see is you, Creed. Sheriff Burke is here. He has evidence of your crimes. Federal marshals are on their way. Stand down." Creed laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Burke is 1 man. I have 20. Do the math, Thornhill. Sometimes 1 man with the law on his side is worth 20 without it. Pretty words." Creed's hand moved to his sidearm. "They will not stop bullets. Then I guess we will see." The standoff stretched. Seconds became minutes. The sun climbed higher, heating the air, making mirages dance on the horizon. Sweat ran down Ethan's back. His finger rested light on the trigger, ready but not committed. Creed made a gesture. His men began to spread out, encircling the ranch. Classic military tactic: surround and squeeze. Tan fired first, not at a man, but at a horse. The animal reared, throwing its rider. The other horses spooked, breaking the formation. Chaos erupted. Creed's men returned fire bullets, slamming into the house walls. Ethan fired back, picking his targets carefully. Not to kill if he could avoid it. To disable, to disrupt. Burke's rifle cracked steadily beside him. The sheriff was a better shot, each bullet finding its mark. Men fell. Horses screamed. The air filled with gun smoke and shouting. From the barn, Tan was a ghost. He would appear at one window fire, then disappear before return fire could find him. His tactics scattered Creed's men, made them afraid of every shadow, but they were still outnumbered. For every man they dropped, 2 more pushed forward. The siege was working. Slowly but inevitably the noose tightened. A bullet shattered the window near Ethan's head. Glass cut his cheek. He did not stop shooting. "We cannot hold this," Burke shouted over the gunfire. "We do not have to hold forever, just until the marshals arrive." "If they arrive," another voice cut through the chaos. strong and clear and speaking Apache. Ethan risked a look. His heart stopped. Riders. At least 30 of them, maybe more. Apache warriors on painted horses flowing over the rise like a wave. At their head rode an older man, gray hair long, wearing a mix of traditional and settler clothing. His bearing spoke of authority earned, not given. Creed's men saw them and faltered. An Apache war party was the last thing they had expected. The elder rode forward, stopping his horse between the two forces. When he spoke, his English was perfect, educated, dangerous. I am Nachai of the Mescalero Apache. This land was promised to my people by treaty. You break it again. We have witnesses. We have evidence. We will take this to federal court if needed. Creed spat. Treaties mean nothing. Perhaps. Nachai's smile was cold. But newspapers in Santa Fe will care, especially when they learn Lieutenant Creed profits from railroad land sales, that he uses his uniform to commit murder for hire. He pulled out documents, held them high enough for everyone to see. Sheriff Burke has been quite thorough in his investigation, and quite generous in sharing his findings with us. The question now, Lieutenant, is whether you want to die here for Hackett's money or live to face a court-martial. No one moved. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Creed's face went through several colors, red to white to purple. His hand moved to his gun. Naka's warriors raised their rifles, not threatening, just ready. Hackett urged his horse forward, his face slack with panic. This is not worth it. Stand down. Creed turned on him. You are the one who wanted this land so badly, and I am the one telling you it is not worth dying for. Hackett's voice cracked. The railroad will find another route. There are always other routes. The fight went out of Creed like air from a punctured bladder. He looked around at his men, at the Apache warriors, at the ranch he had been prepared to burn. The calculation was clear on his face. Pride versus survival. He chose survival. Fall back, he ordered. His voice was defeated, bitter. The hired guns did not need to be told twice. They turned and rode hard, not waiting for the cavalry. Creed's soldiers followed more slowly, their lieutenant riding at the rear, his back rigid with humiliation. Within minutes, the ranch was empty of enemies. Only the Apache remained, and Sheriff Burke and the 4 people who had been prepared to die defending a home that was more idea than place. Ethan lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline crash hit him like a wave. He sat down hard, his back against the wall, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Dia emerged from the root cellar, Samuel beside her. The boy ran to Ethan, threw his arms around his father's neck. Ethan held him tight, feeling the small body shake with fear and relief. You are okay. You are okay. He repeated it like a prayer. Nachai dismounted and approached. Up close, he was even more imposing. Scars marked his face and hands, the scars of a warrior who had survived when survival should have been impossible. He looked at Dia, recognized her. His expression softened slightly. Little Dia, you have grown. Uncle Nachai. Her voice was respectful. Thank you. The elder's eyes moved to Tan, then to Ethan, then to Samuel, taking in the strange family that had formed here. You can come back to the tribe, he said to Dia. We are rebuilding. There is a place for you. Dia looked at Ethan, at Samuel, at the ranch that had almost cost them everything. This is my place now, she said quietly. These are my people. Nachai studied her face, then nodded. Some tribes are chosen, not born. I understand. He turned to Ethan. You saved Apache children at Red Canyon. We remember. That debt is paid now. There was no debt, Ethan said. There is always debt. Nachai's voice was firm. Between those who harm and those who try to heal. You tried to heal. That matters. The Apache warriors began to leave in small groups. Nachai was the last to mount his horse. Before he rode away, he looked back at the 4 of them standing together. The land remembers kindness, he said, and it does not forget. Then he was gone, dust rising behind him like smoke. The silence that followed felt sacred. Ethan looked at his ranch, at the bullet holes in the walls, at the trenches dug for defense, at the people who had stood with him. Sheriff Burke broke the spell. I should go file my reports before Creed tries to destroy the evidence. He tipped his hat. You are good people. The territory needs more like you. Thank you, Ethan said. The words felt inadequate. You saved our lives. You saved your own lives. I just gave you the chance. After Burke left, the four of them stood in the yard and looked at each other. Survivors of something that should have killed them. Bound now by more than circumstance. Ton spoke first. I should go with Nache. Back to the tribe. Dia's face fell. But I have children there. Ton's voice was rough. I thought they died in the massacre. But Nache found them. 3 of my brother's children alive. I need to be with them. Understanding dawned. Of course he did. Family called. The dead might be mourned, but the living needed care. They said their goodbyes the next morning. Ton knelt before Samuel placed both hands on the boy's shoulders. You are a warrior now. Small but fierce. Remember what I taught you? I will. Samuel's voice broke. Will you come back? Maybe. When my children are grown. Or maybe you will come find me. Ton stood and faced Ethan. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then the Apache warrior extended his hand. Ethan took it. The handshake was firm. Final. You are, Brother Ton said. Protect her. With my life. Make sure that is not necessary. Then Ton looked at Dia, said something in Apache that made tears stream down her face. She replied in the same language, her voice thick with emotion. They embraced, and when they separated, both had wet eyes. Ton rode out just after dawn, following the trail Nachaya's warriors had made. He did not look back. Warriors rarely did. The ranch felt emptier without him, but also lighter somehow, as if his leaving had released them all to be what they were becoming. Spring turned to summer. The garden Ton had planted flourished under Dia's care. Samuel grew 2 inches and learned to read full sentences. The bullet holes in the house walls were patched and painted over, though Ethan left one untouched as a reminder. Sheriff Burke returned twice. Once to confirm that Creed had been court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. Once to bring news that Hackett's railroad had been investigated for fraud and collapsed. The land was safe. Their home was secure. On a warm evening in July, Ethan found Dia in the garden. She was harvesting squash, her hands gentle with the young vegetables. He watched her work for a moment, memorizing the sight. Light through her dark hair, earth under her fingernails, peace in her movements. He cleared his throat. She looked up, smiled. That smile still stopped his heart. I have been thinking, he said. Dangerous habit. I want to ask you something. Properly this time. She set down the squash and wiped her hands on her apron, stood facing him with that direct gaze that had challenged him from the first moment. Ethan dropped to one knee. He had no ring, no prepared speech, just truth. Dia, you came into my life like a storm and changed everything. You made me remember how to be human, how to love, how to hope. You gave my son a mother. You gave me a reason to fight. I have nothing to offer you except a struggling ranch and a man still learning how to be worthy of you. But if you will have me, I swear I will spend every day trying to deserve you. He paused. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Will you marry me? Dia looked at him for a long moment. Then she knelt too, bringing herself level with him, took his scarred hands in her own. I told you once that Apache do not need asking. We just decide. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. I decided months ago. I was just waiting for you to catch up. Is that a yes? That is a yes. They kissed there in the garden, surrounded by growing things as the sun painted the sky gold and red. When they finally separated, both were smiling. Samuel's voice called from the house. Are you getting married now? They looked over to find the boy watching from the porch, grinning wide enough to split his face. Yes, Dia called back. Is that okay with you? Samuel whooped and ran toward them. He crashed into both of them with the force of pure joy. They fell back into the dirt, laughing, tangled together. The wedding happened 2 weeks later, small but significant. Sheriff Burke stood as witness. A few neighboring ranchers came, those who had heard what happened and respected it. Nache sent a representative with gifts. Traditional Apache blessing braided together with Christian vows spoken under open sky. Samuel stood between them as they promised forever. His small hands held theirs, making it official, making them family. That night after the guests left and Samuel was asleep, Ethan and Dia stood on their porch and looked at the land they had fought for. The ranch that had almost been their grave was now their future. Dia leaned against him. "Tell me what you see when you look out there." "I see home," Ethan said. "I see second chances. I see proof that broken things can be made whole." She smiled. "You are getting poetic in your old age. Love does that to a man." They stood in comfortable silence as stars emerged, the same stars that had witnessed everything, the pain, the loss, the slow, difficult work of healing. From inside they heard Samuel cough in his sleep, a good cough, healthy. The boy had not had nightmares in weeks. "He called me Ma today," Dia said softly. For the first time, Ethan heard the wonder in her voice, the weight of that word, the honor of it. "You are his mother, in every way that matters." "I know." But hearing it, her voice caught. It felt like being given something I thought I had lost forever. Ethan pulled her closer. "You gave me that same gift. Made me a father again instead of just a man who happened to have a son." They stood wrapped in each other until the night grew cold. Then they went inside, locked the door, and climbed into bed together. Their bed, their home, their life. 6 months later, in the depths of winter, Sheriff Burke visited again, this time with news that made them all gather close. "The federal government has formally recognized Apache land rights in this territory," he announced, "part of a larger treaty reform. Your marriage is being cited as an example of peaceful coexistence." Ethan and Dia exchanged glances. They had not set out to be symbols, just to survive. But if their survival helped others, they would accept that weight too. Burke continued, "More importantly, the railroad is being rerouted. Your land is safe, permanently." The relief was profound. They had won, not just the battle, but the war. The future stretched ahead uncertain, but theirs to shape. That evening they gathered on the porch as they often did now. A ritual, a moment to breathe together before night fell. Samuel sat between Dia and Ethan, a blanket wrapped around all three of them. The boy was drawing again, not pictures of his birth mother anymore. Now he drew this family, all three of them together smiling. Pa Samuel said suddenly, "Do you still have bad dreams?" Ethan considered the question, thought about the nightmares that had plagued him for years. They still came sometimes, probably always would. But they were different now. Sometimes he admitted, "But when I wake up I remember I am not alone anymore." That helps. Dia took his hand, squeezed it. "I have bad dreams too," Samuel said quietly. "About Mama dying, about soldiers coming. We all do, pequeño." Dia's voice was gentle. "Dreams remember what we wish we could forget." "But we wake up together," Ethan added. "That is what matters." The boy thought about this, then nodded, satisfied with the answer. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the Badlands in shades of crimson and gold. The land that had tried to break them had instead made them stronger. The scars they carried had become maps to new territories of the heart. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. Another answered. The old songs continuing indifferent to human struggles. The land abided. The stars watched. And three people who had every reason to give up had instead chosen to hold on. Dia began to sing, soft Apache words that flowed like water over stone. Samuel joined in, his young voice blending with hers. Ethan did not know the words, but he hummed along, adding his voice to theirs. The song rose into the darkening sky, a prayer, a promise, a testament to survival. When it ended, Samuel spoke again. His voice was sleepy but content. "We are a real family now, right?" Ethan looked at Dia. She looked back. In her eyes he saw everything they had survived, everything they had chosen, everything they had become. "Yes," Dia said, "we are real." Samuel nodded against her shoulder. Good, because I do not want anything else. Neither do I, Ethan said quietly. Me neither, Dia whispered. They sat together as night fell completely. The stars emerged one by one, ancient and constant. The wind carried the smell of sage and earth. The ranch stood solid around them, walls rebuilt, future secure. Inside those walls lived a family, not born but chosen, not perfect but real, built from broken pieces that had learned how to fit together into something whole. The past would always be there. Red Canyon, the massacre, the running, the loss. But it no longer defined them. They had chosen to let it inform without imprisoning. To remember without being trapped by remembering. Healing does not erase scars, Dia had said once. It teaches us how to carry them together. She had been right. They carried their scars together now. Ethan's guilt, Dia's grief, Samuel's loss of his birth mother, Tan's separation from his new family, all of it woven together into a tapestry that told the story of who they had become. Not victims, not survivors, just people who had chosen love over hate, hope over despair, together over alone. The wind picked up, carrying voices from the past and promises for the future. Ethan closed his eyes and felt Dia's warmth on one side, Samuel's small form on the other. Felt the solid wood of the porch beneath him. Felt the weight of a rifle no longer needed. Felt the lightness of a heart learning to hope again. When he opened his eyes, both Dia and Samuel were watching him, waiting. What he asked. You smiled, Samuel said. A real smile. I have not seen one of those in a long time. Did I? Yes, Dia confirmed. You did. Ethan realized she was right. His face felt different, lighter. The muscles of smiling strange after years of grief. Tell me what you are thinking, Dia said. I am thinking that I spent so long trying to atone for the past that I forgot to live in the present. And now the present has given me everything I thought I had lost the right to have. He pulled them both closer, felt their bodies warm against his, felt the steady rhythm of their breathing, felt for the first time in years that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. You deserve happiness, Dia said firmly. We all do. The world tried to take it from us. We chose to take it back. Is that what we did? Yes. That is exactly what we did. Samuel yawned hugely. Can we go inside now? I am cold. They stood together, reluctant to break the moment, but knowing there would be more. Tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Moments strung together like beads on a string, forming a life. Inside the house was warm. The fire Ethan had built that morning still burned low. They banked it for the night, made sure doors were locked, checked windows out of habit more than necessity. Samuel went to bed without complaint, exhausted from a day of playing and working and being loved. Dia tucked him in, sang a soft blessing in Apache. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart so full it ached. When she finished, they stood together in the hallway. The house was quiet around them, peaceful. Thank you, Ethan said. For what? For choosing me, for choosing this, for making me believe in second chances. Dia reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the scar on his cheek, the one that had been there so long he barely remembered getting it. You gave me the same gift. We healed each other. They kissed, soft and slow and full of everything words could not hold. When they separated, they were both smiling. Come to bed, Dia said. Tomorrow will come early enough. They walked to their room hand in hand. Behind them the house settled into night sounds. Creaking wood, settling foundation, the whisper of wind against walls. Tomorrow would bring work. Gardens to tend, fences to repair, a boy to teach and love. But tonight they had earned rest, had earned peace. Ethan lay in the darkness with Dia curled against him, her breathing already evening into sleep. He stared at the ceiling and thought about the long road that had brought them here. Every painful step, every loss, every moment he had wanted to give up. It had all led here, to this moment, to this woman, to this family. His eyes grew heavy. For once, sleep did not bring nightmares, just darkness, peaceful and complete. And when morning came, as it always did, they would wake together, would face the day together, would build their future together. The dust had settled, the storm had passed, and in the quiet that remained, three souls had found their way home. Not the place, the people, each other. That was enough. That was everything. The end.